All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the TWiML AI podcast. I am your host, Sam Charrington, and today I'm joined by Mike Miller. Mike is Director of AI Product at AWS. We are, of course, coming to you live from the Future Frequency podcast studio here at the reInvent conference, which I've been covering via X, aka Twitter, or FKA Twitter, and LinkedIn. Be sure to follow me on those networks for the latest reInvent and AI updates and insights. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sam. Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here and chat with you a little bit about what we've been up to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into our conversation. We'll be talking about the product that you are currently heading up here at AWS, a product called PartyRock.
Absolutely. I'm kind of representing with my builder's vest on
Repping
here.
it with
PartyRock. Anybody can build AI apps, so absolutely.
Awesome. As well as some other products that you've worked on previously. But before we dive into those, I'd love to have you share a little bit about your background and how you came to work on these Edutainment AI tools.
I love that word. Thanks, Sam. Absolutely. So again, my name is Mike Miller. I've been with Amazon for about 11 years. First 5 of those, I worked on the Fire TV product, where I helped build and launch that product. And the last 6, I've been with the AI/ML team at AWS, where I've led the development of a number of our kind of hands-on learning products focused around AI and ML, and most recently, generative AI.
Awesome. And you didn't mention those specific products, but they are DeepLens.
That's right.
DeepRacer and DeepComposer.
You got it. Yep.
DeepLens I have and have used. DeepRacer I have and have used.
Nice.
DeepComposer I don't know that I heard of.
It was the third in that. It was the third one that we did, 2017, 2018, 2019. Yeah, DeepComposer, I think we were a little bit early actually, because DeepComposer was trying to teach transformer models through music. And of course, now these large language models, these foundation models, are all based on this transformer architecture, right? Where you're predicting the next tokens. And that was what we were doing with music. We had MIDI notes that we used to train the models, and the predictions were the next MIDI notes in the sequence. And so you could actually play a little melody on the little keyboard, and like the model would kind of predict or sort of complete the melody for you. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, but those products were a lot of fun. You know, we launched DeepLens in 2017. That was
DeepLens,
cool.
I love that. I was at like one of the launch workshops and got one of the things.
Did you get a hot dog?
That was right. The kind of canonical app was hot dog or not hot dog.
No hot dog. And we were just chatting about that last night with a couple coworkers. Yes, that was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming to those workshops. They were very memorable. But
it combined was it green grass?
Yes.
And some
and just an object
some
recognition
model
service. We used like SNS, I think.
SNS.
We would send a text message if it detected a hot dog or not a hot dog.
It was
good
awesome.
memory.
Integration of a bunch of different services and a demonstration of capability in an accessible package.
We taught you Lambda, we taught you Greengrass. I mean, we taught you, object recognition models. We pushed the model down to the device, the IoT device. So yeah, it was we were ahead of our time there. It was definitely a fun one that gave people sort of a fun opportunity just to get hands-on with all these new technologies. Awesome. We launched SageMaker that year, so it was all about, hey, how can we sort of build this story and make, sort of provide some thought leadership around artificial intelligence and machine learning when it comes to, developers getting hands-on. We like to say we learned, we sort of observed that developers at Amazon learned a lot faster and were more effective when they had sort of hands-on sort of opportunities to get into the technology. Mm-hmm. And really that sort of undercurrent has sort of fed the justification of all of those products, DeepLens, DeepRacer, DeepComposer, and even this PartyRock product. What we've discovered is if you make learning fun and you kind of use play to motivate people, they're much more excited, much more interested in sort of engaging, even if it is some learning technology products or technology sort of concepts, people are a lot more interested in engaging and learning.
Yeah. DeepRacer was also an interesting one. It was kind of like a car with built-in computer vision.
That's exactly right. We took a 1/18 scale RC car and we bolted on a compute board. It was an Intel processor that we bolted on it. And then we taught you reinforcement learning, which was a kind of a branch of machine learning that allows sort of machine learning to sort of follow a very complex path and achieve an interesting end goal. And we used reinforcement learning along with the computer vision on the car to teach it to drive around a track. And so you first develop that model in a simulator. So we have a cloud-based sort of 3D virtual racing simulator, and then you train the model there, and then you download the model into the physical car. And you come to one of our events like reInvent or one of our other activities, and you can drive the car around the track. And so, of course,
and
we
it's
said
been quite a platform. Like this, it was launched 4 years
yeah,
ago,
2018,
5 years ago, maybe?
yeah, still going strong.
And
have you seen it here?
I've seen it here.
They've got a
there are
two-story
contests
booth.
that are going on. We did a conference, TWiMLCon in 2019 in San Francisco, and one of the evangelists brought a DeepRacer setup and showed us all how to use it. It's a very cool, very cool tool.
It's a lot of fun. And again, if you make it playful and fun, it's just a lot more interesting for people. So yeah, we DeepRacer did really well. I think very sticky. When we developed it, we said, hey, what's a car driving around a track without a little bit of competition? And I think the competition is an element that really motivates certain people. It's not for everyone. We try to make it fun and sort of non-competitive to get involved. And then for those who want to race and get more competitive, we have this whole DeepRacer League, and it's evolved. We have regions all around the world that compete against each other. You come to the events around the world to qualify for the championships, which we hold here at reInvent. The winner has a giant trophy that they get to hoist. So yeah, it's a big thing now. It's got a huge following.
Has the vehicle itself evolved?
The vehicle itself, surprisingly, no. It's been really great, solid sort of platform for deploying these reinforcement learning models. And it's got just enough performance for it to provide a pretty entertaining drive. I was just over there yesterday, and they've got a pretty complex track, and these cars are zipping around there. 14 seconds is the time, the sort of leading time, and that is pretty fast for these cars around the track. It's really impressive to see. They just drive themselves, so it's really neat.
Well, I will say that I have a DeepRacer that is gathering dust somewhere, and if anyone is listening to this and is inspired to play around with DeepRacer, then give me a shout out,
Awesome.
Tell me a great story about why you want this thing, and assuming that you're not in a place that it will be difficult to get it to, I will get it to you.
Very generous of you, Sam. That's
and
awesome.
maybe even a DeepLens.
All right. Now we're talking.
So your latest product is PartyRock.
That's right.
I was poking you a little bit earlier because my initial foray into PartyRock was, I couldn't tell if it was meant to be a joke or if it was serious because the results that I were getting were so wacky. But you had an interesting response to that.
I think that's a great thing.
Let's start by having you explain what PartyRock is and what the goals are.
Sure, absolutely. So we developed PartyRock as a fun, easy-to-use generative AI app builder designed for anyone of any skill level. No coding required, no AWS account required. Just log in with your social account, and you, in just under a minute, can be building AI, generative AI-based applications. The goal here is to give folks some intuition about generative AI and how it works. We think this is going to be infusing, all of our lives, in the near future. And so just having a better understanding of how these things work, large language models, image models, eventually multimodal models, it's going to be useful for everybody. And we wanted to build a platform that, sort of lowers the risk for experimenting with these things. And I think, Sam, as we were chatting before, play is a great motivator. And, that's it's reflected in the name. It's reflected if you go visit the website, partyrock.aws. You can see it in the website. It's fun,
it's not
bright
meant to
colors.
be serious at all.
It's we lean into the rock motif. You've got vinyl records around, the area where you manage your stuff is called the backstage. And so, yeah, we were just trying to have a lot of fun with it, and hopefully that sense kind of rubs off on the folks who use it.
Yeah. Now, when you go to interact with it, it feels very much like GPTs, which folks who listen to this podcast will know. essentially you can kind of write and save a prompt and then process further prompts or inputs against that prompt. Is that the general idea?
That's right. I think we wanted to make it a little more complex and interesting, though. So we actually try to teach you about kind of chaining prompts together, allowing model selection, allowing you to kind of manage some of the configuration like temperature or top P of some of the things. So we try to make it
clearly didn't get far enough
yeah,
in
yeah,
because
we
I
kind of
just
make
saw
it
the
easy to, yeah, like you can sort of like jump in and just get a little slice, right? We have this thing called the app builder, which you can actually generate an AI app just by typing a sentence. Like you can say,
right,
give me an app that generates nicknames, right, period. And then we'll actually generate like a few different widgets for you in an app. One widget would be an input widget, like, and it'll say, okay, enter the name. And then the second widget will be a generative AI powered, text widget. And it'll default to one of the models, and the prompt will probably be something like, using, and then it's got a little reference sign at, name to reference the prior widget, generate 5 fun nicknames, based on that name. And so you enter a name in the input prompt and you see some output. What's super interesting then for users is on that generative AI powered widget, there's a model selector. So you can go for all the models in Amazon Bedrock. You can kind of tell, obviously Anthropic's Claude and Amazon's Titan and other models as we add them to Amazon Bedrock, so users can experiment that way. But what I think is super neat is you can also chain widgets together. So users can see that the output that gets generated from the generative AI can actually be used to form the input of another widget. So there's a common like pattern that we've seen, like folks who want to do like role-playing character generation, right?
Okay.
Where you can have like 2 input boxes, right? Like maybe like the race and the class, or you could even make it even more ambiguous. You can say like, what are the strengths of this character, and sort of what are the emotional state of this character, and then you can write prompts that say, based on those 2 things, like generate sort of a name and a short description of this character, and then you can have another prompt or another generative AI widget that says, hey, based on the description that the model came up with, generate an image for what this character could look like. Oh, now based on the image and the description, tell me like a secret backstory of this character. And so you can actually have these things kind of chained together and feed one into the other. So there's a little bit of depth there for building more complex applications.
Yeah, I mentioned to you that my initial foray was playing around with translation prompt, and what's a PartyRock app called? An app?
We just call it an app.
Okay, so the app, the app translated into a surprisingly diverse set of languages beyond the one that I was intending to target. Exactly.
Yeah. And Sam, I think we were mentioning like that sort of showcases like, hey, different models have different sort of specializations, or different models are good at different kind of tasks.
That was the point that I was just going to raise. Like my initial reaction was, oh, this thing is crazy. Is this serious or what? But the fact that I could then select another model that may be more appropriate, I think is part of the learning experience.
Absolutely.
Because the models aren't all the same. They don't all excel at the same things.
Yeah, and we all know, like, there's the cliche, right? You learn from your mistakes. And in this kind of app, this kind of scenario, like I said, we want to take some of the risk out of making a, quote, mistake, right? Like, it should just be a fun learning experience. Like, oh, that didn't kind of quite turn out the way I wanted it to. What if I did this? Oh, wait, actually, that works a little better. And then you can kind of see that. I think the other really neat thing about PartyRock that we added is this remix functionality, which you may not have seen, but the goal is to give inspiration. So if you see an app, somebody, and the cool thing is these apps are just shareable via URL. So somebody posts an app on social or shares you an app via URL. If you think that app is pretty cool, but you're like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if it did this, or if it like was tweaked a little bit? Just click the remix button, and in engineering parlance, we fork it and we make it your own. So you basically get a copy of that app. Now you can remix it. You can change the prompt. You can change the input. You can sort of edit the text that it says and kind of make it your own. So we've got this built-in ability to get inspired by what other people are building inside of PartyRock.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you learned about the underlying technology? Well, let's maybe first talk about the underlying technologies that PartyRock is built on, and then the things that you learned using those.
Yeah. Well, primarily, the full name is PartyRock and Amazon Bedrock Playground. Okay. And so, at the end of the day, we're 100% built on top of Amazon Bedrock. So if there are foundation models that are available in Amazon Bedrock, once they're generally available, they will eventually make their way into PartyRock. So really under the covers is the various foundation models from Amazon Bedrock. And there's kind of two use cases, right? As we described, there was the app builder where you can just give it a sentence or two and it'll try to build the app for you.
Yeah.
And then you can also go into manual mode and you can just sort of plug widgets down on your little canvas, whether they're static text or input or text generation or image generation. The former case where you just enter some text and you say, hey, PartyRock, build me an app, like that's all built today on top of Anthropic's Claude. And we have kind of a little bit of like infrastructure underneath there that tries to build some scaffolding. And then it asks the model to kind of fill in the scaffolding to actually build an application.
Scaffolding in what sense?
Like, okay, hey, if the app's going to need some input from the user, like let's build add an input widget and make sure you're prompting for the right thing. If the app needs to generate an image, like, okay, add an image widget and then make sure the prompt is correct. So that's the kind of scaffolding that I mean, like under the covers.
Okay.
In the manual building mode, it's really up to you as a user, like which models you want to pull in. You can kind of drag and drop in the different widgets. So we have an input widget where we can take something from a user, a static text widget if you want to like provide instructions in your app. And then there are 3 generative AI powered widgets. So there's the text one that just you give it a prompt and it generates text. The image one where you give it a prompt and it generates an image.
Okay.
And then there's a chatbot where you can kind of provide a prompt that guides an interactive sort of chat experience with a user.
Yeah.
And so we've seen people use those for like, you can give it a prompt like, hey, pretend you're a sommelier at, such and such fine restaurant and provide wine advice to the questions that the user asks, right? If you want to build like a menu recommender app or something like that. So you can kind of imagine like people can kind of do some fun stuff with those apps. But the tech is really based on Amazon Bedrock.
And one of the patterns that we've seen in the past with like some of the SageMaker products is like there's a light version, but you can press a button and like push that into SageMaker and access the underlying code or whatever and then build on it. Is there any concept like that here, or is it just kind of for play?
Yeah, it's a really astute observation. We debated this a bit, as we were building this product. Like, how much do we want to make it so that you can, build something here and then sort of export it over to a notebook, for instance, or what are the Bedrock API calls that I could use to sort of mimic this application? So
I think it's almost like if you look at it, you kind of turn your head and get past like the Rocky motif. It's almost kind of like a mini Streamlit and LLM.
Yeah, like a little prototyping environment almost. Yeah, and I think that's something that we've been debating all along. So I wouldn't be surprised. I can't tell you what's in the future because we're still kind of figuring it out for this product. But I wouldn't be surprised if we added some capabilities like that to make it easier so that, let's say you did build something, you prototype something, and you're like, tested out some prompts, and you're like, oh, wait, actually, this is like the golden prompt. I want to use this. Like, click a button, export to the API, the Bedrock API calls, so that I could copy into my application or something like that. Or maybe even further down the road, you prototype something and then it exports it directly into your like Code Catalyst environment or something like that. Like I could see some of those type of things happening. But certainly, you're absolutely right. At the beginning, we're very much focused on low barrier to entry, no coding skills required, and so we want to sort of advance that sort of message in the app. But I think there's an opportunity to do a little more, as you're saying, down the road.
Also, not necessarily in line with no coding experience and low barrier of entry. One of the announcements that I was most excited about in Swami's keynotes today was the model evaluation capabilities for Bedrock.
For Bedrock, yeah.
And it would be really interesting to see those surface via a very accessible tool that allows people to start thinking about, okay, I can, throw up some, toy app. How do I actually think about how it performs, relative to model selection or relative to prompts, things like that. Yeah. If I could put in my plug for the next PartyRock extension,
your request.
It would be model evaluation.
Yeah. Well, I think you can get a kind of a light version of that already in PartyRock, right? Because you could potentially just create 3 output widgets, and each output widget,
interesting.
You just pick a different model. And that's a good way, just like we were talking about, like some models are better at certain tasks. That's a great way to kind of look and say, hey, which model is the best suited for this task that I wanna sort of pursue, right?
Yeah.
We also give you, today it's free for a limited time, and what we do is we give everybody kind of a bucket of credits, and you whittle down those credits by building and using apps. And what we do in the model dropdown is we give you kind of like a relative scale of like how expensive, quote unquote, each model is going to be, right? So, you know, if you want to sort of prototype an app or sort of explore like, hey, I want something that's like very low cost but very fast, you know, that excels at like a specific task, like a text summarization. Like that's something that, you know, a smaller model that might cost less, that has lower latency will allow you to access, you know, very cheaply. Whereas a more expensive model, it might be overkill for like just a simple text summarization task.
Right.
You know, because you don't want to provide a bunch of instructions and have it follow instructions and engage with you in a conversational tone where, you know, you'll need a much bigger, like more like instruction-tuned model to kind of get that kind of output.
Yeah, I mean, even that, I don't know that the target audience is necessarily going to get that, but that's potentially really deep. Like,
that's right.
I have a friend that talks about kind of the LLM, like supply chain and kind of the model development process, and the idea is like you start with, you know, the most powerful, most expensive model that'll get you there quickly, and then you try to, you know, kind of poke at cost management and try to scale it back and see how far you can take it. And the idea that you can like play around with that idea in this kind of toy platform is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it lets you do some exploration, you know, because I don't think everybody, you know, there's probably different approaches, right? You could always start with like the big heavyweight ones and then scale back, or start with the low ones and sort of work your way up, right? I think there's different approaches to kind of tackle that, but yeah, absolutely, and that's what we were going for with the product is, you know, kind of a quick and easy way to get hands-on with some of this stuff, and maybe you discover like, hey, I need to go a little bit deeper. I need to, you know, measure latency or measure accuracy or do more sort of very subjective kind of tasks around measuring, which, you know, the Bedrock, you know, model selector feature, you know, will probably accomplish for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you've kind of suggested this, but it's obviously a lot easier to evolve software products like PartyRock than it was to evolve DeepRacer or
with the hardware.
With the hardware.
Yes.
Do you see PartyRock evolving over time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the neat things about AWS and our philosophy is listen to the customer, you know, see how they use your product. And I think just in terms of my history of in launching products as a product manager, you know, I love launching v1.0 products because you almost never like get it exactly right. People are always going to use your product in like new, interesting ways that you didn't quite realize. And then the faster that you can like skate to the puck, where that puck is going, and like respond to how people are using it, you know, that's really like the recipe for success for building something that's engaging and sticky and sort of useful for those people. So absolutely, we're looking at how people, you know, build these apps and use them. You know, we've got a great little feedback mechanism on the website, you know, monitoring, you know, socials, like where people are posting, and absolutely, we want to start improving this thing over time to see what, you know, match up to what people want it to do.
Beyond the kind of edutainment aspect of it, are you seeing folks like creating actually useful things and sharing them?
Not really, and I think that's totally
by design.
100% fine with us. Exactly, we kind of don't want you to build anything like production. Yeah, maybe a utility
My
app.
unintentionally mission critical
right,
PartyRock app.
No, please. If you're listening to this podcast, do not do that with PartyRock.
I'm scraping a SQL converter and using it on my hyperscale website.
Yeah, exactly, my production dashboards. Like, no, don't do that. Yeah, no, we've seen a lot of like really funny ones. Some like useful ones, like some adults, some parents are generating like bedtime story generators, right? Like they'll take as an input like what's the kid's like favorite character or what mood are they in, right? They'll enter that, and PartyRock will, you know, they'll prompt it to like generate a story based on what the kid enjoys or what mood they're in, right? So that's kind of a utility one that's useful and it's creative. It's like a perfect sort of fit for, you know, like a PartyRock sort of application. one that's gotten a lot of traction is it's called the Sassy CDK Helper, and it was done by
Sassy CDK Helper.
Yeah, so the CDK is an Amazon toolkit, right, that you can use, and so it was one of our AWS heroes wrote this, but he wrote the prompt such that it was like, hey, give good answers, but do it in like a really sassy sort of satirical kind of way, and name drop some of these people. People use it not to get like real like advice on how to use the CDK, but just to see like this sort of
kind
sassy
of like the
interaction.
Pirate's Guide to EC2 or something.
Right, it's like, what do you mean you won't use serverless? Like, that's crazy. Like, you know, everybody's going serverless now. You'd be an idiot not to, for instance, or something fun like that, right? So people are having a lot of fun with it from that perspective. And I think that's where it shines and sort of gets people's juices flowing, is those creative uses.
And are most people doing kind of simple, one-step prompt thing, or taking advantage of this chaining?
Yeah, no, you should see some people like have like 10 or 12 widgets that they'll put together because they want to build an app that's based on like 3 or 5 or 8 different inputs from the user, right? And then they'll use all those inputs to generate a couple of different outputs, like I mentioned before, like the role-playing game character generator. Some people have gone like way deep on those, and they'll be like, okay, like generate my stamina and my charisma, and provide the backstory, and provide the image, and tell me the strengths and weaknesses of this class, and like they've kind of gone overboard with some of that stuff. So it's all possible. We do see a lot of simple like single input, single output kind of things, but I think the interface and what you see like encourages you to like, hey, just throw another widget down, and it's really easy to sort of tie it back to the other widgets that are there to build on top of it. So yeah.
Thinking about, again, this kind of edutainment concept more broadly, and I can imagine like folks in an enterprise setting, like technical people that are trying to articulate concepts like chaining and different models to executives.
Yeah.
I would want maybe the ability to reskin this a little bit more seriously, but it seems like it could be an interesting tool.
Yeah,
for
I think
that
that's a super interesting idea. And like I said, like if we hear from customers that that's something that they want to go do, then by all means, we'll take a look at that really closely and say, okay, how could we like make this useful in an enterprise? I mean, that was one of the really neat things that came out of just looking back on like DeepRacer. When we launched DeepRacer, you were there. It was very much about individual developers. Hey, here, get hands-on, use the cloud-based environment to learn reinforcement learning and kind of get more deep into machine learning. What happened even that first year was like individual developers engaged with it, and they were like, okay, this is fun, makes learning fun, like I'm having a good time. I'm going to take this to my workplace and tell my boss about this. And the next thing we knew, we had huge numbers of enterprises who wanted to run DeepRacer events, like do like the DeepRacer League or race, but at their company. And so that sort of took off, and that's a huge part of what we see usage of DeepRacer today is individual companies, small, medium-sized, the biggest companies in the world, companies like JP Morgan Chase, they have like a global program built on DeepRacer to get their users excited about machine learning, and we saw that kind of take off. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw similar usage for PartyRock, and we'd have to kind of adjust and think about how we'd sort of serve that audience a little differently, right, than the fluorescent, yellow PartyRock vest, right?
Right. This is a huge shift that we're going through around generative AI, and it's accessible, kind of inherently accessible to a broader audience than reinforcement learning was.
Yeah.
And I think like the edutainment concept at scale could be really interesting, especially when you compare it to like traditional training and education, which is like boring.
Exactly. I mean, who wants to sit through that? It's funny. You're probably familiar with our working backwards process. At Amazon, we start with the press release and you talk about, but you also, part of that process is thinking about like what problem are you solving? And even back when we did DeepLens, we kind of called out one of the problems was, hey, learning like this deep technical material, either like you're a scientist and you're like getting the research papers as they're published to archive.org, or you're like going through this super boring class where you're like, oh, this is like the worst training of my life. And we were like, wouldn't it be cooler if you had something that like you could get hands-on and build a hot dog, no hot dog thing and have a texture phone and like, so it's funny, like that kind of concept has resonated from 2017. We've been thinking about that.
Yeah, speaking of archive, Were there any hairy technical challenges here, or is it kind of purely an engineering, software, scale, kind of UI even kinds of issues?
No, it was very much a just, hey, this is kind of fun, let's get it out the door. And I think that's what allowed us to build it so quickly, like kind of productize it. Because it was really based, like I mentioned, the origin story was based on this internal tool that kind of...
Like a hackathon type of project?
Yeah, there was a tool that a team in Berlin, they built. It was sort of, they called it the LLM Playground, where they allowed you to like try a couple different models and actually chain some widgets together. And it spread like word of mouth, like wildfire. I remember I got a Slack message, you got to check this thing out. We saw it and we were like, okay, we think this thing is going to be super useful for Amazon employees. Like, how do we do this? And so it's probably like one of the fastest product development, product launch time frames, at AWS. Like from like, I don't know, August to November, we built and shipped this thing. So yeah, it was very much, there were no like hairy technical problems that we had to tackle. It was more about like the branding and who is this really for? And can we lock in on that and kind of go do that? And the name also was fun. It was fun naming this thing because we were like, hey, it's built on Amazon Bedrock, so what, PartyRock, yes, that's just going to make it
I didn't even get that.
It just makes it fun, quirky, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, very cool, very cool. How do you see, what's the future of edutainment at AWS? It's like you have a great job. It's like you run a toy workshop.
That's what I tell everybody. I'm like, I have the best job. I have the best job at AWS and Amazon. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to think of more of these things. I mean, they work,
so you're not going to give me the scoop.
I don't know what the scoop is. We got to come up with them. I mean, that's the great part about this. Is like every year, or creative ideas come from all over the place. Whether it's an internal tool that we productize, or DeepRacer was based on. The essays at reInvent 2017 did this event. I don't know if you heard about it. It was called the RoboCar Rally, where they used an open source toolkit to build cars, and they didn't use reinforcement learning, but it taught a different machine learning technique, and it was like, again, the light bulb went off. Like, hey, like people are super excited to do that. Like, oh, let's go build that. Let's figure out how we make it, how we scale it up, make it more accessible for more people. So these ideas come from anywhere, and we love having fun with them. So yeah,
that's awesome. Well, Mike, thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy reInvent schedule and sharing a bit about what you've been working on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for your time, Sam. Thanks for having me on the program. It's been great to speak with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.